allowed?
Especially if you have your mask on, yeah. Because then we can't read your
So,
Yep.
good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Harvey Epstein, for coming. Assemblyman, 75th District. We thank you, 74 District. So thank you very much for coming. Today we have basically like a town hall with our young people of AFJ. They have some pressing issues that they want to ask you about.
Sure.
And see what you feel about these matters. We have Ms. Anastasia Henry, Mr. John Torres, and Mr. Michael Lang. And so at this time, I'll leave the floor off to you all. First of all, if you could, Mr. Epstein, talk a little bit about how long you've been within this district and some of the things that you do.
Well, thank you for inviting me here, and thank you all for taking the time to sit with us all. So we're across the street from my district office, which is right at 107 Avenue B. And I've lived in this neighborhood for decades. Raised both my kids here. They were both born and raised in the Lower East Side. My daughter was born right here at Bellevue Hospital. My son was born over at NYU. And you know, this is my home. This is my community. And my kids went to elementary school, middle school, high school in this neighborhood. So this is really, you know, a neighborhood I've cared about and I've worked in for decades. I was elected into the legislature. This is my 5th legislative session. So I'm running again for a re-election for another 2 years. And in that time, I've done a lot of work around affordable housing, criminal justice reform, environmental justice, educational and education justice, and rights of people with disabilities. Those are really the areas that I focused on. But really what I focus on is this community and fighting for people who live here, whether it's during the pandemic, making sure people had basic necessities like food and hand sanitizer and masks and gloves, and delivering thousands of boxes to our people in our community, or ensuring that people needed rent help or utility assistance or mental health support. Our office has been in this community really helping people as much as possible. And on the legislative level, really listening to the people in our community and taking those voices to Albany so we can make the policy changes, knowing that we have a legal system and structure that's class-based and race-based and gender-based. So we have a racist and classist and homophobic society, and that's impacted in our laws. And our job is to try to pull those out and change it to ensure equity and justice in an unjust and unfair society that we live in.
Excellent. Those are all principles that Avenues for Justice stands for, and we're glad that we're friends of yours.
Thank you.
At this time, we have Ms. Anastasia Henry, and she'll introduce herself and then go into some questions that she has.
So, I'm Anastasia. My first question is, I know that you was a part of the drug law that passed in marijuana law.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like that can impact teens and the youth, whether it can help them or affect them? Because they're the ones who more so use it. It's an indulge, it's exposed to them. So I feel like that can benefit them or affect them.
So it's a really good question around when we legalized cannabis in New York last year, and this is something that I felt really important that we did. And just so you know, I believed for the last 80 years that cannabis was legal and pot was legal for white people.
Mm-hmm.
They were just illegal for people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did was to try to level the playing field, to say that people of color were disproportionately impacted by the criminalization of marijuana, and that by legalizing it, we were trying to put everyone on the same playing field. And then the question would be, once we legalize it, how are we going to ensure that people who are affected by the criminalization benefited by the legalization? So we created with the Marijuana Legalization and Taxation Act, which said that the people who are getting permits from seed to sale should go directly to impacted people. So what that means is people who are currently in the gray market, and just people I shouldn't use the word black market because I think it's a problem, but people who are currently in the gray market, where we need to move to the legal market, how do we ensure they can get the permit, whether they're growing it whether they're transporting it, whether they're selling it. How do we ensure that they have rights to be able to get those permits? So that's what we're trying to work on. We have a board that was, we hired people earlier at the end of last year who started in January and are creating this process to ensure that young people get permits. And why do I think that's important? I have no desire for people to eat or smoke pot. It doesn't really make a difference whether they do or they don't. But it's an economic opportunity, and people who have been in the gray market, who created this whole trade, are smart business people. And when they're smart business people, but they're doing something that's dangerous to themselves and dangerous to others. So how do we get those people to move to a legal market and use our smart business sense to create a company that gives them profit, that gives them equity, gives them opportunity? What we've seen in other states around the country, and when the people move from illegal to legalization, that most of the large companies who are going to the legal market are white owned. So basically, it takes a group of people who are never been historically discriminated, never faced illegal consequences, and giving them the financial benefits for this multi-billion-dollar market. We in New York, when we legalized it for medical marijuana, created 10 companies. Of the 10 companies, all 10 were white owned. So we have this history of racism, history of class bias, and then we're trying to really turn it on its head and said, we want to prioritize people who are involved in the criminal justice system, people who have been historically discriminated, and ensure they get those rights. So I do think it's really important that we do that, because I think we had to legalize it, and I do think we need to ensure that people who are impacted have access. I think at the end of the day, I don't smoke. I don't think people should smoke, because I think smoking is bad for your health. My father died from, he was a cigarette smoker, and he died at 48 years old from smoking. So I don't want anyone to smoke if they can avoid it, but if people do, and people are gonna buy it, let's ensure that people who've been hurt by it can benefit by it. You're welcome.
And Ms. Henry, I think you have one more question.
Yeah,
Correct?
I also read that it was a part of helping the low income community.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you've seen, like, that made you wanna help out? Like, you stuck in house, was like, alright, this isn't good, this gotta change. What is it that you seen that made you wanna help?
So that's a long life story about my life experiences. That I mean, I grew up in a family with people. Both my parents were active in the world. My mom started running for office when I was 8 years old. My dad was involved in a union, became a union president of a teachers union. They taught me activism from early on. Like, I remember being 8 years old and standing on a picket line because my teachers went out on strike. So I didn't go to school for 3 months because the teachers were striking. And those values informed everything I did around economic inequality and social inequality in our world. And then as an adult, seeing it from my peers, my friends, people I know and love who face consequences in the criminal justice system, and people face consequences of homelessness and lack of adequate housing. And so these are friends, these are, when my kids were little, I would take them on play dates, and we'd see people who are much better off than us financially and much worse off than we were financially, and really learning how society and our systems are broken and how we need to fix them. It led me to professional paths along the way. I ran a homeless shelter when I was younger. I was a foster care worker. I went to law school and became a housing lawyer to prevent people from being evicted, and then got involved in community organizing, and all those pieces of my life really stem from my growth and experiences, knowing that I am white and I'm privileged and I'm male, and those things in society are benefited, but how do I, while knowing that and can't really change that, how do I use my life experiences and my professional work to advance things that I believe in around economic and social equality? Thank you. Thanks for asking the question.
At this time, we have Mr. Michael Land. And if Mr. Land, please.
I have one question.
Sure.
My question was about prison time.
Mm.
Still is. I was wondering, like, how do they determine what number they give you for the crime?
So So under law in New York State, different crimes have minimum and mandatory sentences, right? And that's set by statute. That means that people like me, who got to office before I did, set rules around what a minimum and what a maximum sentences are. And so those laws are just things that are written by human beings that we can change. Like, I don't believe in life sentences. I don't think that, and lots of people will disagree with me, I don't believe that things that you did when you're 20 years old should result in a life sentence, being incarcerated for the next 50, 70 years of your life. I just don't believe it. Other people do. I believe in correction. I believe that people do things and their behaviors can be changed. And I have friends who've done terrible things in this world. I have family and friends who have stabbed people and killed people. I have friends who engage in violent offenses beyond those. I still love those people, and those people made mistakes. But that doesn't mean they should spend long periods of time. What?
I don't feel that way about like rapists and stuff.
So we may disagree about that, and that's okay. And that's what democracy allows us to do, to say there are people who you think should never be let out, and how horrific of the crime. I just think that if we believe in a system of corrections, instead of a system of punishment, like we have to decide what we believe our criminal justice system is for. I believe in correction. I believe that people can learn and correct their behavior and change, and because of those transformations that they do in their lives, should be allowed to come out and live their lives again. And we see it. We've seen people who when they go to college and prison, what we call recidivism rate. The general population of people get out, 45% of people end up going back to jail when they come out. Unless, if they go to college in prison, it's less than 5% recidivism rate. If they spend more than 15 years and over 55, less than 5% recidivism rate. So there are people who do things while they're inside who transform who they are. And that transformation is really deeply meaningful for me. That doesn't mean they didn't do things that harmed other people. It means they may, through this process, be a different person when they come out. And so that's just my lens on the world. I understand that not everyone shares those views.
So, how does a charge get from a felony to a misdemeanor?
Oh, so basically, when someone allegedly commits a crime, right, they may be charged with multiple offenses, right? They may be charged with felony, different felonies, and misdemeanors. You could be, for one incident, you could be charged with 5 or 6 different crimes. And in what's called a plea bargaining arrangement, let's say you have committed a felony, allegedly committed a felony, the police may say, well, we can't prove we can convict you on the felony, but we'll agree to the misdemeanor if you consent to it.
So,
Why does the DA do that?
why just not throw it out? Why you trying to fit if you can't prove that's a felony?
Why would the DA want to do it? So the DA's job, and a lot of people, and there are different DAs who think different things. But some DAs think their job is to put people behind bars. Other DAs think that they need to look for justice, and other DAs think that their responsibility is to protect the public. And so, depending on which borough you live in and who the DA is at the time, they may try to seek different things. And we have a new DA in Manhattan whose lens is more closely aligned with my views of the world. And so a DA will say, hey, you know what? At least if we can get you on this misdemeanor, we've got something. Other DAs will say, well, what are we looking for? What is the goal we want? And maybe we should just drop the charges. Or maybe they, instead of doing jail time, there's something else we're looking for. Maybe there's a program or services, other things that might be helpful. Or maybe a DA will be like, hey, this story that we had isn't actually what happened. There's some other facts that we're missing, and we need to hear this side of the story.
You have to say something.
I have zero say in that.
Just say use the legislation.
I can pass legislation, which means I can help. So what the law is today, people like me have passed. what the law could be in the future is people like me are trying to change. So the example is decriminalization and legalization of marijuana. We passed that last year, so people should no longer be arrested for possession or sale of marijuana. So sale be different because it's still not, you don't have a license. If you have a license you can sell, but if you don't have a license you can't. Sorry, make that distinction. So we can pass laws, but if we're not involved in the prosecution or defense of a specific case.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is that helpful?
Yes.
And now we have Mr. John Torres. Mr. Torres, please.
So my question is for housing. I know that you were on the rent guide board.
Yeah,
meeting,
I served on
and
there for 5 years.
you had a part to do with the rent freeze for like 1 to 2 years for like 1 year leases.
Yeah.
Right? I just wanted to know, what can you do to help the current situation with low income, like people on welfare or
Mhm.
SSI, to get housing or that kind of opportunity when it's their first time, because they don't really have like a current living situation because the shelters are all filled up as we speak.
Well, just so you know, there's a right to housing in New York, so if someone is homeless, they have a right to a place to live. So the city can never say there's not enough room for put someone in a transitional housing or as a shelter, as you said, so they're required to. So if someone asks the city to get a bed and they are being denied, that's illegal, and they can come to our office and we can assist them if they are from this neighborhood. The second thing is we are fighting for new programs. One program is the Housing Access Voucher Program, which on Monday we voted for what's called our one house budget. We're in the assembly and we're part of the legislature. You know, 3 branches of government. It was the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary branch. In the legislative branch, we pass our ideas of what we want in the budget. And this program would be a state-based Section 8 program. So for people who are homeless, they can have access to a voucher to go get an apartment anywhere in the state that they wanted. So it helps homeless people get housing. Right now they have a program called VEPS, which prevents people from getting evicted who are on public assistance. We increased last year the level of rent people could get for VEPS, but we also needed to expand beyond people on public assistance because we know so many people are housing insecure. In addition, we put money towards public housing, knowing the crisis we have in our public housing system to ensure they have enough resources. You know, there's a longer conversation around how we need to fix public housing, and I have a lot of ideas, and I know other people have a lot of ideas how to strengthen our public housing network. But we also have what we can do about future housing, and how do we ensure that we can build more affordable housing in our city at people who are lower income, who need it. There are current programs like for numbers actually, it's called 421A program, which is a developer program and does build some affordable housing, but it's for people who are making too much money. We need affordable housing programs for people who are making, minimum wage or $20 an hour job, not people who are making $100,000. And that program right now, as it's set up, doesn't work for most New Yorkers. 75% of all New Yorkers can't afford the affordable housing in that program. So we need real programs that affect real New Yorkers, and those are the things that we're fighting for.
Excellent. One more question and then we will conclude.
I would say if you were able to pass a bill with your powers yourself, what bill would that be to improve that situation?
I could pass one bill? Only
Whatever, as many as you need, but what would that be?
Yeah. That's a really good question. We have a lot of bills that I think we need to pass. I think there's can I do 3 in 3 different buckets?
Yeah.
One is, I think higher education should be free, right? So everyone goes to school, you go through kindergarten through 12th grade, right? And you get your Metro card, and then you get your lunch at school, and then you finish with high school, and then you go to college and you fall off a cliff. You don't get your Metro cards anymore, you don't get access to free food, you don't get housing. We need a K through 16 instead of K through 12. We need a comprehensive program that allows higher education to be free and provide comprehensive services. So I had a wish list that would be first on my list. I'll say My dad only got to college, he went to Brooklyn College because it was free in the 60s. My grandmother was a single mom raising 3 boys. My dad had 2 choices, to either figure out how he was gonna work to go to college or go into the military. His 2 brothers both went into the military. He, luckily enough, got a job at the post office and then went to college. So the only reason he was able to afford it because the post office job was helping my grandmother, who she delivered milk in Brooklyn. Like back in the day, people used to have like glass bottles of milk, and they used to, give it a bottle and then refill it. That was what my grandmother did in Brooklyn. And she couldn't afford to send them to college, and college has become unaffordable. It is, and even though CUNY is cheaper than almost all colleges, it's not free, and it makes it really difficult for people. So we need free higher education, but really a K through 12, K through 16 system instead of K through 12. 2 is, we live in a city where we prioritize private developers more than affordable housing. So we have what's called an as-of-right system where people can do as-of-right development, which means if you have a lot, you can build whatever you want up to a certain envelope, but you don't have to give back to this community at all. You don't have to put any affordable housing in. You don't have to do anything that gives back. No schools, no nursery school, no after-school program, no social services. We need to move away from it. We need to a system that prioritizes the people who live here. In this neighborhood, 20 years ago, we saw a lot of, 30 years ago, displacement and gentrification. It's because we saw market rate housing being developed and not affordable housing. We gave our land up for market rate development. We really need to ensure that we have a deep, comprehensive plan for affordable housing. So 3 pieces of that is stop the market rate only development, deeply subsidized affordable housing, allow for homeowners to do what's called accessory dwelling units, fully fund our public housing, and build 100% affordable housing at levels of AMI. It's called area median income, which is basically 50% of AMI, which is basically a family of 4 at a 50% of AMI is $50,000. So we can make sure we build that housing for families up to that level. And if we could do that, we could really stabilize communities and get people who are homeless into permanent affordable housing. I think the third thing is we have a disability/mental health crisis in our city that we're not dealing with. Right? We don't, for people who have long-term mental health needs, there aren't beds for that. We've seen the homeless population of, unfortunately, people who have mental health issues and get involved in the criminal justice system. And we could prevent all that if we dealt with people with mental health issues, gave them stable housing, gave them medication to support they needed. We're not doing any of that. So really digging into our healthcare, mental health, access for people with disabilities. We had a kind of mental health/disability plan that provided resources and services. We could turn a lot of the problems around.
Well, we wanted to thank you so much, Harvey. One of the reasons why you're here is because due to your hard efforts, you allowed us to collaborate with Men's Warehouse, and we're able to provide suits for those within our organization as well as their families. And so we thank you for that. And at this time, we thank all who have participated, all 3 of you all, for this fine town hall. And we wish everyone a good day.
Yay.
Thank you, guys.